Today, veteran public service officer, former ambassador to Ukraine, Marie Yovanovitch, testified to the impeachment committees despite orders from the White House and the State Department that she should not. She testified about President Trump ordering her removal as ambassador, reportedly because of her insistence that any requests to the Ukrainians for investigations or any other thing having to do with law enforcement, those should be handled under proper channels. There is a proper and legal way for governments to work together on law enforcement issues. That is reportedly what Marie Yovanovitch insisted on when it came to Ukraine. That, of course, would not do for the type of scheme the president was trying to pull off with the help of his lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, and a couple of guys who were just arrested the other night at Dulles Airport trying to flee the country. When Marie Yovanovitch resisted the idea that what they were requesting should be handled sort of off the books and unofficially, she was taken out of her job. And we learned today that was on the president's orders. Of course, we now know that within days of her get out on the next plane departure from Ukraine, which was demanded by President Trump and apparently carried out by Mike Pompeo, within days of her departure from Ukraine, you may recall Rudy Giuliani within days was on television bragging about how he personally was now headed off to Ukraine to go get some investigations started, which he hoped would be, quote, helpful to my client. Giuliani made that announcement on TV that he was heading off to go get some investigations cooking that would help Trump. That was within days of Yovanovitch being told to get out of Ukraine by President Trump and Mike Pompeo. We know that Giuliani essentially moved in on the Ukraine embassy as if he were a U.S. government employee to try to enact this scheme in Ukraine alongside the guys who were just arrested this week when their indictment was unsealed. And alongside a different U.S. ambassador, Gordon Sondland, who was sort of detailed to this project alongside Giuliani. Ambassador Gordon Sondland had no diplomatic experience whatsoever before his current job as ambassador to the EU, which he got after he gave $1 million to the Trump inauguration. He funneled it through a few different LLCs, but he did give the inauguration $1 million. He is the one who, according to new reporting from the Washington Post, apparently blurted out at a White House meeting that Ukraine was going to need to cough up some important investigations. Text messages and internal communications among Gordon Sondland and others show that he's the one who was pressing that Ukraine needed to not just open investigations into Joe Biden, it needed to publicly announce that it was doing so. Because that obviously would have a better political impact, right? If the public knew that those investigations were underway. He's also the Trump administration official who, according to Republican Senator Ron Johnson, told him directly that President Trump had a quid pro quo going with Ukraine here, in which their military aid would be contingent on them launching those politically salient investigations that the Trump administration and the president himself were demanding. So, yeah, they needed to get rid of Marie Yovanovitch, who saw it as her job to stand up on behalf of the U.S. government and American national interest, on behalf of the rule of law, and against the perversion of government powers for private or partisan political gain. Yeah, Marie Yovanovitch would not be the one you would want there while you were carrying out this scheme. So they got rid of her and they brought in these Trump guys. The same thing appears to have happened specifically around the withholding of that military aid to Ukraine. This is what the Wall Street Journal was first able to report last night. It's now been matched by the Washington Post. They both are now reporting that career officials inside the White House who worked on budget issues, they reportedly raised the alarm that Trump withholding this military aid to Ukraine, we now know as part of this deal for Trump to get help with his reelection from Ukraine in exchange for that military aid. Career officials inside the White House reportedly raised the alarm that withholding that military aid was illegal. We now know from the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post that in response to those expressed concerns by career White House officials, the White House took responsibility for the handling of those military funds away from those career officials, and they instead brought in a guy who was a Trump guy, who had been the executive director of the Wisconsin Republican Party. And they put him in charge instead of arguably illegally withholding those military funds. Yahoo News advances this story further today with a report that the Pentagon, quote, went so far as to conduct its own legal analysis of the military aid being withheld, quote, determining that the holds were illegal. Quote, a government official confirmed that such an analysis took place. So did several Capitol Hill staffers. They all described the conclusion of that analysis in similar terms, which is that it was illegal for President Trump to be withholding that money. And if you're trying to do something illegal, of course, you'd want your own guy in there to be put in charge of that illegal thing you're trying to do. So the career folks, the actual public servants, would no longer be in the way. So we see that happen with the ambassador to Ukraine, with Yovanovitch, essentially being pushed out, recalled abruptly because she won't play ball, and they put in the guys from Trump world who will play ball. We see that happening in the White House, right? With the military aid illegally being withheld. Well, the people who know that's illegal, they got to go. Let's put in our own guy. He'll play ball. Even on the corrupt side deal that these guys were apparently trying to do alongside the effort to illegally enlist a foreign government in helping Trump get reelected. I mean, when these guys who were working with Giuliani on that deal, these guys who have now been arrested, were reportedly running this side hustle in which they were trying to get the leadership changed at the biggest natural gas company in Ukraine. Even in that instance, on the side hustle, they still wanted to install their own guys who would hook them up with contracts from the biggest natural gas company in Ukraine. I mean, from the federal indictment of these guys, we know that when they made a more than $300,000 illegal donation to the biggest pro-Trump super PAC, they arranged the paperwork so it would look like that donation was from a natural gas company that they invented. It's kind of a weird part of the indictment. Why would they invent a fake natural gas company to make this donation rather than doing it in their own names? Well, that fake natural gas company they invented, that may be connected to the fact that they were also running a side hustle where they were trying to take over and put their own people in charge of the biggest natural gas company in Ukraine. And again, in that side hustle, the same pattern holds, right? Whatever purpose these guys had in mind for whatever they wanted to do with that company, right? You'd want to get the real people out of the way, right? You'd want to get the people who are actually doing the work, who might be in the way of your scheme, who might be alarmed by your scheme. You want to get them out of your way. NBC News has a really fascinating long report on that part of the scheme today, in which they note that these guys who were working with Giuliani, who were trying to take over this natural gas company, what they were trying to do was push out the existing CEO of that natural gas company in favor of somebody else who they wanted to install. The guy who they were trying to push out was someone who, quote, had won high praise from U.S. and European officials for his anti-corruption efforts. Right. We are starting to see how this goes. It's like a masterclass. If you're running a very big corruption scheme, you have to get the anti-corruption people out of the way. You have to get the not corrupt people out of the way. You have to get the people with integrity who know what's illegal out of the way. You got to get the ambassador fired. You got to get the White House employees who handled the disbursement of military aid pushed out. You got to get the CEO of the company who's there to make sure it's not corrupt. Right? You got to get all of those folks out so you can instead install your own people and operate this scheme. The problem with all of this from tip to tail is that those human beings who you have to push out, they are people of integrity. The upstanding executives and the officials and the technocratic people and the anti-corruption folks, the people who are there to do a legitimate above-board job, those people, when you push them out, they turn into witnesses for what you did. They're alive. They can talk. They might even defy your orders not to talk. In behavior we saw modeled by career Foreign Service officer Marie Yovanovitch today, they will defy orders from the White House not to speak, and they will respond to a congressional subpoena to turn over to congressional oversight committees what they know. Now, one of the people for whom this is very bad news is the Secretary of Energy, Rick Perry. He appears to have connections to that effort to replace the leadership at that Ukrainian natural gas company, right? To replace the people who were there, including the vaunted anti-corruption guy who was CEO, to replace that guy and others with people who are more to the liking of Rudy Giuliani's now jailed henchmen. Secretary Perry appears to have been caught up in that. He has now been subpoenaed personally. It should be noted he has also said that his department will cooperate fully with the impeachment investigation. We shall see now that he's got a subpoena on his own desk. It is also terrible news for Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who was up to his neck in this before today, but now he's in a terrible position. He is not trying to cooperate. He has decided that his legacy here will be his efforts to try to block all State Department personnel from testifying to the impeachment committees. Well, as of today, that is not working. Secretary Pompeo, you can order them all you want not to testify. In response to duly issued subpoenas from the impeachment committees, though, they can still turn up. It was Marie Yovanovitch today. It will be longtime State Department hand Fiona Hill on Monday. It will be another career veteran State Department official, George Kent, on Tuesday. On Thursday, it's going to be that Trump donor guy who got sent in basically to replace Yovanovitch and deliver the quid pro quo demands to the Ukrainian government. You won't get your military aid until we get our investigations. He was the guy alongside Vice President Mike Pence who appears to have issued that directive to the Ukrainian government. After him, there will be more State Department officials who are expected to speak, both in terms of depositions already scheduled and depositions that we know are coming. Mike Pompeo's own role in this scheme, for which the president is being impeached, appears to be kind of a marquee thing now. I mean, it is not hard to imagine Secretary of State Pompeo being impeached for exactly what the president is being impeached for here. I mean, he is the one who carried out the president's orders to recall that ambassador, which was apparently part of this scheme to clear the way for what Trump was trying to do with Ukraine. Pompeo's State Department, apparently up to the level of the number 2 guy in the department, was aware that Yovanovitch had done nothing wrong. Pompeo's State Department put out this false statement that she was returning from Ukraine as planned, when in fact, as they knew, she was being recalled early because the president demanded it. For 2 weeks, Mike Pompeo tried to pretend publicly that he had no idea what had gone on between President Trump and the Ukrainian president on the call for which the president is now being impeached. It would soon emerge that, in fact, Pompeo was on that call, listening in to the entire thing, even though for 2 weeks he made it seem like he had no idea what might have happened there. I mean, Mike Pompeo today, seeing this brave ambassador walk across the Capitol grounds, check herself in through the magnetometer and sit down for 9 hours of testimony, seeing that ambassador defy his orders not to show up today, seeing her show up to say her piece, including releasing a blistering public version of her opening statement. You can imagine how today felt for Mike Pompeo. He might have thought, though, that he had found a little bit of a safe haven in his public schedule today. His main public event today was a religious freedom event in Tennessee. Ooh, that at least should be safe. He clearly did not expect to run into local reporters who knew exactly what they were talking about, who were absolutely read in on this subject, who knew what to ask, who wouldn't back down, and were ready to ready to advance this story even when he would not answer. Watch this from Nashville.
Big announcement yesterday. One of your most trusted senior advisors resigned. He's adding his voice to a number of career diplomats who've expressed frustration over what they see as your failure to stand up for government servants and servants like Ambassador Yovanovitch, who've been caught up in the Ukraine controversy. Did you do enough to defend the ambassador privately and publicly against the smear campaign that was being waged against her? And will you speak to that now?
Well, ma'am, you have some of your facts wrong. So you should be careful about things you assert as facts before you state them.
Can you speak to Michael McKinley's resignation?
I don't talk about personnel matters.
Did he speak to you personally about it as he resigned?
I don't talk about personnel matters.
Did you support the ambassador being recalled months before her tenure was up?
I've supported every mission that the State Department's been engaged in.
In mid-February, you were in Warsaw, and so was Rudy Giuliani. During your time there, did you meet with Giuliani?
You know, I don't talk about who I meet with. I went to Warsaw for a particular purpose.
So you're not going to say whether you met with him?
So when I was in Warsaw, I had a singular focus. My focus was singularly on the work that we have done.
It sounds like you're not going to say.
When I was in Warsaw, we were working diligently to accomplish the mission.
Text messages show that diplomats under your authority told the Ukrainians that a good relationship with President Trump was only possible if they investigated his political opponent and theories about what happened in 2016. Were you aware that this was happening?
You know, again, you've got your facts wrong. Sounds like you're working, at least in part, for the Democratic National Committee when you phrase a predicate of a question in that way. It's unfortunate.
The reporter asking those questions was Nancy Amons from WSMV, which is the local NBC affiliate in Nashville. Wow, did she do a good job there. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, listen, can't answer questions from local reporters, not when everybody can follow this very straightforward story and his role in it. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo may find himself getting impeached here, not only for his role in this scheme, but for how he has tried to cover it up since. I mean, Mike Pompeo tried to hide the fact that he was on the call for which the president is being impeached for a couple of weeks. He appears clearly now in an interview with NBC's affiliate in Nashville, Tennessee. He appears clearly now to be trying to hide something about when and where he was meeting with Rudy Giuliani while the scheme was being hatched. Secretary of State Pompeo, did you, in fact, meet with Rudy Giuliani in Warsaw earlier this year, before we all knew this scheme was underway? Again, this is the scheme for which the president is now being impeached. And everybody's trying to get as far away as they can from this, right? But with the first arrests, with not just one, but multiple photos of the president and the vice president with these men who were just arrested, and the president's eldest son with these men who were just arrested, with news about the White House dinner that President Trump invited these men who were just arrested to just last year. That's him inviting them to the White House for a meeting, for a dinner meeting. Right? I mean, this is a downward spiral at this point. The Homeland Security Secretary resigned tonight, Kevin McAleenan. The Energy Secretary, Rick Perry, is facing a subpoena for his involvement in this, including what looks like the financially remunerable side hustle that these guys who have now been arrested appeared to be engaged in alongside the thing for which the president's going to be impeached. The Secretary of State appears to be at risk of impeachment himself, as he is multiply implicated in the president's scheme, with a State Department underneath him that now appears to have turned roundly against him, including the resignation in protest of his number two last night. Buckle up. I tell you, here we go. And this is going to be another weekend when the news does not stop. Stay with us.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.